Hello there and welcome to the Irish Film London podcast season 2. I'm your host Niamh Brannigan and I am joined with Jerry Maguire. How are you this week, Jerry?
I'm grand, Niamh. Thank you very much for asking. How are you?
No problem. I'm good. I just got back from the Kerry Film Festival, which was really brilliant festival, I have to say. And this episode is going to be coming out a little bit later, but this weekend coming up is the Richard Harris Film Festival, and then there's Still Voices in Longford, and then obviously we'll be coming into our own IFL festival, so it's just festival season. Loads
of film festivals all over the place at the minute. What was your highlight from Kerry Film Festival, if you had one?
Oh God, there's a short called Ready. No, I'm joking.
Is that the one you're in?
I can't say that. There was, Lakelands is such a great film, and I'm really excited for more people to see that for when it comes out, and we'll definitely have the lads on when that happens. But it's just a really great film, and I think as well the lads, for any kind of budding filmmakers who are out there as well, they just went about it in such a great way. The Rob and Patrick, the guys who made it, because they did their short. That was kind of like they had 4 then funders, or like to get support and stuff to send out, and then it was kind of a feature kind of roughly out of the idea of that short. And I just think that's such a great idea, especially for your first short or first feature, trying to get it up and running,
Yeah, that's brilliant. And you mentioned the Richard Harris Film Festival. One of the documentaries that's playing at a couple of screens in the UK at the minute is one that was at the Venice Film Festival called The Ghost of Richard Harris by a director called Adrian Sibley. So it's quite interesting to see that film out at the same time as the festival playing. Yeah,
definitely. Hopefully it will kind of do the rounds, which is great. That's another thing is I just feel like there's so much to see.
There is.
So in a way it's great that there's so many festivals. It gives people more chances, and also again to let people know that if you're listening over in Ireland, IFL do have a small section where you will be able to watch 1 or 2 bits online, which I think is really great. So this week in the cinema, I was supposed to go and see Banshees last night, and I didn't make it. So I'm still so excited because it's just getting the most amazing reviews. I think I saw one review said it was flawless.
Whoa. It's not often you get those, sometimes you do get 5-star reviews for films, but like something like this, it's really rare to get such glowing reviews for it, isn't it? I mean, I've not seen it yet either, and I'm dying to see it.
Yeah, I've heard as well, it actually kind of has taken a few people by surprise emotionally, which I think is really interesting. So I'll definitely go and see that, and then we can chat about that next week.
I'm hearing really good things about Barry Keoghan's performance in it as well.
Definitely. And then last night in Dublin, so it will be a week ago for this episode, there was the premiere of The Wonder, which I think will be out when this podcast is out, which is really cool. So both of us will have to go and see that and also chat about that one. But that just looks stunning. Oh my God.
Oh God, yeah. And the red carpet footage from that last night that we were looking at online this morning, that looks gorgeous. And the film itself looks gorgeous. An amazing cast. It's the kind of film that I think Irish audiences really go for. I mean, it's sort of in that vein of period settings that are sort of re-exploring or dramatizing or whatever, like recontextualizing our relationship with the English, essentially.
Yeah.
To put it, there's no other way for me to say it.
We love those. We love them.
Yeah.
But no, I think it looks beautiful, like the cinematography and everything. And then obviously Florence Pugh is in it, and also Niamh Algar. So hopefully we'll be able to get Niamh back on to chat about it, because I think that would be a great episode, because it just looks so great.
Yeah.
So what else is coming out?
So on the day that we release this podcast, it should be the release date for a brilliant documentary called Lyra, which we will have done a preview screening of at the Bertha Dock House on Tuesday, November 1st. So it is a little bit weird. We're being quite open about the fact that we've recorded this in advance. But yeah, I know that will have been well attended, because there's already loads of tickets sold for that, and it's great to see it.
Good.
And maybe there'll be a chance for us to interview Alison Miller, the film's director, for a future podcast episode. I'd be really, really interested to talk to her on here as well. And what else have we got? We got Lorcan Finnegan's Nocebo.
Just in time for Halloween.
Yeah, brilliant. Lorcan's previous films have been really, really well made. The trailer for Nocebo looks amazing. Obviously one that we've been tracking this year and that we want to see. Incredible cast, incredible filmmaker. Really, really hope that does well for Lorcan as well. He's a great guy.
And one thing as well I want to point out for people who maybe were listening last time, listening to us chat about our Irish Film London Festival programme, we have an added masterclass, which I think is really cool. Tell us about that.
We do. So as you probably know, our industry programme focuses on events that can help people get a little leg up in their career. And we talk to some people from across the Irish industry who are experts in their field. And we're really pleased that we've added a screenwriting masterclass, which is a conversation that's going to take place between Mark O'Halloran, who is the screenwriter and one of the actors in the film Adam and Paul and Garage, and he wrote some of the episodes for Conversations with Friends. He pops up all over the place as an actor and a writer, so he's a brilliant Irish writer who's going to be in London for that. And we're also on that panel are the writer-director duo Rachel Moriarty and Peter Murphy, who are the writer-directors of Róisín agus Frank, last week's episode. So nice tie-in for the podcast there to be able to call back to that. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, by the way, have a crack back and listen to that. It's a really lovely interview which reveals a lot about the film.
And that's our closing gala.
That's our closing gala at the festival, yeah. While I'm on previous episodes, the episode before that was our interview with Catherine Ferguson for Nothing Compares. Nothing Compares is still picking up awards. That episode is still available for you to listen to. Do have a crack back and listen to that as well. It's a lovely little, a slightly more concise interview because Catherine didn't have very much time to talk to us, but we covered a lot of ground, or rather you covered a lot of ground in that, Niamh.
Oh yeah, I was going at 90 miles an hour. I just didn't want to stop talking, but I was so anxious about holding her up, but she was so brilliant. And with these kinds of interviews as well, sometimes they've done these 100 times over, so they're just pros. They know exactly where I'm going and what I'm going to say. But no, it's great. And I think as well, I've come across loads of people going, oh, I went to see that Nothing Compares, and just being so taken aback by it, and you've been so kind of moved by it. So I think it's great that it's still kind of out there and moving people. So yeah, if you've seen it, if you've gotten a chance to see it, definitely go back and listen to that episode, because she's a great director, and I'm delighted she's going to be doing more and more stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's loads of other great stuff in the Irish Film Festival London programme this year, without wanting to dwell too much on it, because you can, of course, always go to irishfilmlondon.com and check out the full programme yourself. There's loads of great fiction films in the programme that are probably worth mentioning really briefly, as well as kind of classics like In Bruges, which is screening sort of as a retrospective on the basis that Banshees of Inisherin is out in the cinema now. We wanted to do a little callback to that.
That duo though, Colin and Brendan, like what a unbeatable, phenomenal duo. So to see them maybe do a double bill, maybe like let's encourage our listeners, go to Banshees and then to In Bruges, or the other way around, and just immerse yourself in these Irish amazing men.
I'm slightly jealous I didn't think of that now, actually. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so come to In Bruges, come to see The Quiet Girl. That's our audience choice film. Honestly, that's selling really well. Do snap up your tickets for that as soon as you can. Obviously, come to see Aisha, our opening film in the West End. Come to see Róisín agus Frank, which is our closing film at the Riverside. Come to see The Bicycle Thieves, Pumped Up, which is a really, really, really funny Irish comedy from last year, which is getting its UK premiere on Thursday the 17th at our festival. And come to see Dónal Foreman's new film The Cry of Granuaile.
That's today's episode. So I sat down with Dónal, who was over in New York. At one point I think you can hear the New York sirens in the background, so he definitely wasn't lying. And we chatted about his film The Cry of Granuaile, and it was just so interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that I took away from it was I thought I was going to be sitting down and, watching this kind of fact, or biopic kind of thing. And it's actually interesting that we talk about fiction films, because it balances that format of documentary style / just, you know, fiction, feature film style of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And he kind of blended the two of them together really, really impressively, I thought.
Yeah, do you know what? I've noticed something this year, and even in some of the Irish films that I've seen come out, where there is a sort of a lot of filmmakers are playing around with format and like film stock, and you know, Cry of Granuaile is one that's shot in 16mm. It really made me think about films like Hole in the Head by Dean Kavanagh that came out earlier this year, which really plays with camera format and, you know, the meaning of, you know, the sort of the specificity, if you like, of these different camera formats and the way that it affects how we tell a story. I think The Cry of Granuaile is a film that talks about the way that we tell stories and how that affects the way that we remember legendary figures like Granuaile or Grace O'Malley or whatever you want to call her.
Yeah, and I think as well, just even as a medium, like Dónal chats throughout the interview at one point, and we kind of talk about, you know, keeping film alive, you know, and if you don't use it, you know, it will just at one point, you know, I mean, I imagine we might get there maybe at some point it will just all be digital, but, you know, to try and keep that tradition of shooting on film alive. And yes, okay, it might be harder, and, you know, time wise it might be tougher, and equipment wise, and actually he was saying it was hard to find people who are you know, had experience in it, but if you don't push yourself to do it, then it will just kind of die out, you know. So I thought that was really I just thought that was really cool that he did it, because you could easily just go, oh, you know, I think that's too hard.
I think that's really important, and you're right to mention that, because, you know, as digital stuff becomes more prevalent, and it is like pretty much like 95% of everything that you see now is on digital. Like, it is an art form that's going to die out, and like there's people around like have you been listening to the Eddie Lenihan podcast? There's this podcast called Tell Me a Story with Eddie Lenihan. Eddie's the famous Shanahy who is quite vocal about us losing our folklore and our sort of oral tradition. But Eddie's got this podcast that I've come across called Tell Me a Story with Eddie Lenihan, and he's a Shanahy, which means he's a storyteller who keeps the oral tradition alive. And it's brilliant to see that there are people out there like him keeping the Irish oral tradition alive. And in the same way, I think people like Dónal and Dean and people who play around with camera format and who want to continue using film, they're keeping traditions of visual storytelling alive as well.
Yeah, exactly, definitely. And yeah, I just think I kind of struggle, I think, at the moment with some new films that come out when, you know, you might see these big shots of maybe a camera following a train or, you know, or a plane or whatever. And my brain kind of goes, but I know a camera can't do that. You know what I mean? And then I know I'm watching something really digital or affected or, you know, and it kind of takes me out of it a little bit. So that is definitely one thing that this film does not do. And it brings you in, especially gives you a very intense emotional experience, I think, this film. So definitely check it out. It's going to be in our festival in November, so come and see it, and I hope you guys enjoy this interview. So thanks a million, Jerry.
Brilliant. Thanks, Niamh.
If you're part of the regular Irish Film London audience or want to get more from your experience, consider joining our growing family of members for a range of exciting benefits. Irish Film London is a non-for-profit organisation. Our mission is to promote the best new Irish film to audiences all over the UK, and with the help of this podcast, the world. If you become a festival friend or a festival champion, you get perks like discounted tickets for films and events, free access to Irish Film from Home films, and invites to networking events, and so much more. So check it out now. Hello, Dónal, and welcome to the Irish Film London podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me today, especially being all the way over in New York. So I usually start my podcasts off with just wanting to go right back to kind of the birth of the film, and I'm especially interested in this one. So I guess I'd love to know, when was the moment that you realised, I want to make a film about Grace O'Malley?
Well, I'd been thinking about that for a long time. Yeah, I'd had the idea of like, I would be interested to do something about her for for years, and I knew the stories growing up, and I kind of traveled around those places with my mother. And I actually wrote an outline for a totally different film before that was set in a post-apocalyptic Ireland, where like different moments from the past repeated themselves, and the main character was going to be Granuaile, Grace O'Malley, but like 100 years in the future, kind of thing. But I haven't made that one.
That's
yet.
the sequel. That's next.
But yeah, and the more I thought about it, I felt like it was trying to do an actual like big historical epic, apart from not being able to afford it. It wasn't as interesting to me. And the more that I read and researched about her, what fascinated me was the way there was so many different perspectives on her and interpretations. And over the centuries, she's been made to mean different things to suit different people. So those kind of layers of the myths and the writing about her, I thought like, well, that would be interesting to explore. And then I had an unusual inspiration then by I met this American film producer in New York who said if I could come up with a vehicle for an American actress in Ireland, that he thought he could raise some money in the US for it. And I thought, that sounds like a terrible idea. Thinking of all the like American and Ireland films that are usually, it's like the like Irish American guy comes back to take over the farm, or the like American woman comes and falls in love and, you know, gets up to hijinks with the locals and all these cliches. But then I was thinking if I could subvert that and kind of use some of those expectations and do something different, that would be fun. So that was kind of spurred me to actually come up with the basic premise of this. And then I contacted that film producer about it, and he didn't reply to my emails. But by that point I was hooked. So then I ended up applying to the Irish Arts Council for their new authored works award, and then they gave us the money, so we made it.
I think that's so great though, not to get, and this kind of goes for a lot of people in the industry, whether it's filmmakers or actors, whatever, you know, just because they don't reply back, or you might get the first job, or you might get the first application of funding. You know, if you really want to do it and you're hooked on it, there's always ways, you know, and to keep going for it. So that's really great. I love that you still did that, because I think it's so easy sometimes to just go, okay, fine, it wasn't meant to be, you know, whereas no, there's just different ways to get it done.
And then, well, after I got the Arts Council funding, I wrote to him again and said I got the funding. He wrote back right away.
No way.
He was like, oh, really?
Interesting. I'd love to ask as well about at the beginning you have a gorgeous Emily Dickinson quote, but are not all facts dreams as soon as we put them behind us. When did that quote kind of jump out at you, or kind of spoke to you for the beginning, to put at the beginning of this film?
It was at some point in the writing, I can't remember where exactly. I'm a sucker for good quotes at the start of films, and I think,
have you got like live, laugh, love around your apartment and stuff?
That was a close second for this film, but it didn't quite make the cut. But I think, yeah, it's like, you know, it's a very complex film and there's a lot of ideas running around it. When I kind of came across that poem, I thought was like, oh yeah, that sums up something that's really at the center of the film and helped me understand the film better, what I was trying to do. So it was kind of natural pick. But yeah, it's one of her envelope poems that weren't ever published. There's this beautiful book of just like things that she wrote on the back of used envelopes. That some of them might have just been sentences, like that one, no more than actual poems necessarily. Yeah, that's where I found that.
Loved it. I love it. I really do. And like that as well, I kind of carried it with me throughout the film, especially my second time watching it. With Grace O'Malley, I mean, I've always heard of her, but I was never actually when I was kind of rethinking back, I was never actually really kind of educated or taught about it that much. And I was kind of so baffled as to why, because I really enjoyed learning more about this amazing character throughout your film. And there kind of definitely has been, as you were saying, like a surge of interest in recent years in Granuaile, or Ireland's Pirate Queen, or Grace O'Malley, who, whatever you would like to call her. She's got so many different names. And obviously she's known for, she took to high seas at aged 11, defied Queen Elizabeth I, and rebelled against the English army, and all like occasionally while pregnant. And I think that yours is kind of a really unique take on her, and a really important addition to all of the works that have been kind of done on her. So I'd love to ask as well about, like, to chat me through your casting process, because you have just this amazing duo. You've got Dale Rickey and Judith Roddy. Dale plays the grieving kind of American filmmaker, and then Judith is her Irish assistant, who she finds to bring her along on her journey with her, who also kind of has a lot of baggage underneath. And how did you come across these two ladies, and then when did you know that you kind of had the right duo for this project?
Well, Dale Dickey was my first choice for casting that role, and it was the first person that we approached. But when I initially came up with it, I didn't have anyone in mind in particular. And she's someone that I just knew from films. She's one of those, like, most people don't know her name, but you know her face because she's been a character actor in so many TV shows and movies. And particularly film Winter's Bone. She starred in with Jennifer Lawrence, was one that I really loved her in. And I get excited when thinking about casting, about like letting an actor do something that they don't usually get to do. And I became aware of that when I was quite young, because my mom wasn't in the film world, but she had a lot of friends who were actors or were involved in film. And there was just a great Irish actress, Ruth McCabe, who was like a friend of my mother's, she was like the nurse in My Left Foot and different things. And I used to think, watching her on screen and then knowing her, that it was like she had all this range in how she behaved in life, but then she tended to get certain kinds of roles in films, but it was clear there was all these other things that she could do. And so I was wondering that about Dale Dickey as well, because she generally plays like very hard Southern kind of like working class characters who are criminals or addicts, or like, this kind of thing. And one thing I like to do when I'm casting is see if I can find the actors on a podcast like this kind of thing, like if where you can just listen to an actor talk for like an hour and get a sense of them. And so I did that with Dale, and with Dale I could see that it was like, oh yeah, there's clearly, she's got all these other things going that I hadn't seen in some of those other films. So I feel like she could definitely do it, and it would be fun for all of us, because it's not, a kind of character she's played before. So that was exciting. And then I just wrote a letter that got sent to her agent, and she, I think once she heard it was in Ireland, she was like, before she read anything, it was just like, yeah, let's.
Does she have any connection to Ireland, or well, other than the natural kind of Irish love affair?
She's from Knoxville, Tennessee, and they're mostly like Scotch Irish.
Okay.
There. So there's like, a bit of a connection. And she'd actually, coincidentally, years ago, she'd done a reading of a play about Granuaile in New York that a friend of hers had written, that I don't think was ever produced, but she was like at play, so she'd actually run into that part before. And yeah, she connected to the character in a lot of ways. And then Judith, I'd like met a few times before, and I'd seen her on stage in Pan Pan Theatre productions and one of their like experimental plays, and I thought she just had like a great presence and energy and a kind of physicality to what she did. And I thought, you know, we had an unconventional development process with this where I wrote a lot of the script in rehearsal with the actors, like I'd done on my previous fiction feature Out of Here. So and given, you know, the weird fantastical nature of some of the film, I thought the kind of theater she'd done before gave me the impression she'd be up to, you know, to do some play with some weird ideas.
And that's such an interesting way of working? Was it quite a collaborative process, or was it just more that for you it was kind of more on the spot or in the moment, creating the script, I guess, the story that you wanted to make?
It was a bit of both. Like when I'd done it before on Out of Here, it was you know, that film was about kind of like young people in Dublin in their 20s, and people were cast very close to their to who they actually were. So there was a lot of room for people to bring their own experiences to it. And this was a bit different because the characters are so specific and they have these backgrounds and all that, you know, especially Judith's part with all this knowledge of Granuaile and stuff. You know, you can't really like throw an actor in a room and be like improvise your ideas about history. It's so it was a bit more written, but it was doing it in that environment I really love, because you're able to get immediate feedback and dialogue about what you're doing. So I could go home and write something, and then we try it out the next day, and immediately they can tell me, no, that doesn't feel right, or, you know, I think she should talk more about this, or we haven't addressed this, and I can take that in. So they get to bring a lot to it that way, and helping me figure out what's right for the characters.
Definitely. I just also want to say the fact that there was a New York siren in the background. You definitely are in New York. Like, you're not lying. I just think that was a perfect addition to the podcast. But I just think that's such a really great way of working, and it's quite refreshing. And I loved what you were saying there about with Dale, that, you know, there was more in her wheelhouse than she had been maybe able to do in other films. And I imagine that'd be so refreshing as an actor to be given something that might challenge you in a different way that you haven't been before, because it's so easy to kind of just box actors into, you know, they do this style and they do that, when really, you know, the kind of, which is fair in one way, but also, you know, actors are actors because they want to play, and they want to be so many different characters. So I'd say that was just really really great for Dale to kind of get this thing that was different to what she had done before. And you kind of touched on it there. I just think it's such an interesting format, and one that I really haven't seen a lot of, the kind of a documentary style yet still feature film kind of format. And I know that's kind of your vibe, and what was that like, kind of combining the two genres or medium of filmmaking, maybe, if that's the right word?
Well, I think the documentary that I'd made before this, The Image You Missed, which was kind of what I call like an essay film style documentary that had a lot of voiceover and archive, and was mixing together all these different elements. I think that making that film opened me up to a lot of new ideas and techniques of how I could make a film. And I brought some of that to this, in that, you know, there's all this, like, you know, research about Granuaile and archival elements and quotes that are brought in. And I wanted them to really feel alive in the film, that it's not just something that the characters refer to occasionally, but it's also that they have a kind of, those elements have a living presence in the film as much as the actors. So there's these moments where we dip into different books or photos or or films that they're looking at. So I guess, yeah, because of making that documentary, I felt quite free to just let those things blend together.
And I love as well, like the first scene that with the camera shot of Fionn and Judith in the cameras in the back of the car, you know, so you really feel from the get-go, you really feel like you're kind of a fly on the wall, or, you know, you're there with them then throughout the rest of the journey. You know, it really kind of starts from the get-go, which I really, really loved. So you chose to shoot it on 16 millimeter film. So chat to me about what the choice was, because or why you chose to do that, I guess, because I really loved it, because I think it just gave it a whole other element of kind of otherworldliness and a whole other kind of different perspective. So when was it that you knew that that's how you wanted to shoot it?
So I always had the idea that Dale's character Moira, the film that she's making, the film within the film would be shot on film, and that she's just this kind of like old school New York experimental filmmaker, where like that's her thing. And originally that's all I was thinking, and the rest would be digital, because I thought, well, it'd be crazy to shoot the whole thing on film. But as we were trying to figure out, it's actually like it almost would have been more complicated to shoot on film and digital and have to have two setups for the whole thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like double the equipment and the work, and yeah.
And would have meant I had to really lock in some choices, because I was also free in the editing of this to blur the lines and be like, this was shot for one purpose, but now actually this is going to be something that Moira shot or something, you know? And then also there's a point in the film where I kind of wanted to feel like, you're like, wait, are we in the film that Moira's making, or is this the film that Dónal's making? And if it's all the same format, you're freer to do that.
Definitely.
So there was all these sensible reasons to do the most insensible thing of shooting the whole thing on film in 20 days on these remote locations in the west of Ireland. And we had a great cinematographer, Diana Vidrascu, who's Romanian and based in Paris and has a lot of experience shooting on film. So she was also, of course, encouraging me to do this. Although it was definitely difficult, and, you know, like caused a lot of challenges along the way. Even just finding a camera, like we couldn't find a camera to rent in Ireland to shoot on 16. We had to get the equipment package from Paris in the end, and had to send the footage to London, this place, to get it processed. But it was worth it, I think. And all the kind of influences, the sort of films that I was thinking about and inspired by making this, were all shot on film. And at a certain point, I think when you're shooting digital, you need to like embrace that and not be wishing it was film or trying to make
it look like film.
I think it's better to like embrace what the medium itself has to offer. So
would you do it again?
I would do it again. I wouldn't do it again like the exact same way, or for in those circumstances with that budget, because of how hard it was. Like I wouldn't drive myself crazy in that particular way before. But I think it's also important, like, you know, I want film to survive and it to be that people keep using it. And so I think with that as well, you got to put your money where your mouth is sometimes. And like, it's not, if people don't pay for it and shoot films on it, then it's not going to be around. And
definitely, I really loved the choice. I just think it elevated the film even more. And actually, Diana was going to be the next thing I was going to ask about, because the cinematography in it is, I think, is just absolutely stunning, and kind of takes, you know, tourism Ireland to a whole new level. So what was it? So how did you meet Diana, and how did that kind of relationship come about?
I'd met her at the Rotterdam Film Festival, where I'd shown the documentary The Image You Missed that I made before, and we got on, and I was she's also an experimental filmmaker in her own right, and usually shoots on film, and is very interested in her work in like wild mountainous landscapes. And she made a film about like a volcanic island, and so I thought her like sense of landscape, and coming from a more unconventional background as well, I thought would kind of add to the project. And yeah, so we just we didn't know each other that well, but she was excited about it and worked out well.
And she had experience in shooting in film then as well, so yeah. I imagine that was quite a big plus.
Yeah, which also is not that easy to find.
Yeah, exactly, definitely.
He feels comfortable shooting on it.
And chat to me then about the locations. So you shot on Clare Island, Achill Island, Louisburg in Mayo, and then obviously in Dublin as well. But did you have any weather issues? Did you come across any obstacles throughout the shoot on the different locations?
I mean, lots of obstacles, nothing too, like, we were generally blessed with the weather. There was one day where it was just raining too much and we couldn't shoot, but usually it worked out all right. There'd be, you get some days where it's just such bizarre, eccentric weather, like it rains for 20 minutes and then it's sunny for 20 minutes and then it rains again. And you're like, you've shot one half the scene in the rain and then you're like, oh, I guess we have to wait for it to rain again, or whatever.
Yeah, because if you didn't, it would genuinely look like you shot it in 2 different days or different places.
Yeah. I mean, the hardest thing really is having to shoot so fast. Shooting in 20 days is brutal and is kind of standard for like low budget films these days. But I feel like it should be a separate category of film, at festivals or in awards, that there's like the films that had 3 months or 6 months to shoot and the films that were shot in 20 days, because it's kind of not the same art form. You're not like, you have to operate creatively in a totally different way, because you are having to like compromise and just kill your darlings on a more extreme
could
level.
The way instead at the beginning of some films it's based on a true story or whatever, you could just have, by the way, shot this in 20 days.
Based on a script that we didn't have the time to.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely.
And the original score in this film, I just think, is so beautiful, and I think it's quite dreamy, and it creates the perfect amount of kind of epicness and drama, and then tension as well at the same time. So how did you come across and choose your 2 composers for this?
So yeah, Nick and Alesia, really talented couple of composers and musicians. It was just through asking around some musician friends in Dublin that I got put in touch with them, and they were they had the perfect mix of skills and experience, because they're so versatile and wide-ranging in what they can do. And as well as the orchestral score, they did pretty much all the other music in the film. So there was things where I thought I was going to have to like license a song that's like a kind of blues song that plays in the background while they're in the living room. And then Nick and Alesia were just like, no, we can do that.
Yeah.
They did this like punk industrial soundtrack to Maura's older film. They did a blues song, a jazz song, some, like the traditional Irish music that's like playing in the museum. They did all of it,
because those other ones, like, they cost so much, and people, like, I don't think people realize how, like, if you even want a minute or a clip of any kind of song that's already out there, it's just a huge amount added onto your budget.
Yeah, and the like 40 seconds of the song at the start, which is the one thing that they didn't make, that's like a song by Bert Jansch. It's that's the most I ever paid for a bit of music.
Yeah.
But they they did all these different elements. Or Alesia she's from Ukraine, and she actually did like a keening song in Irish that we hear like in the distance. She's like singing kind of a bit of like Shanno style singing as well. And then the orchestral score, I had some kind of reference points from films I was inspired by that, you know, I had an idea of the general feel that I wanted, and then they were able to really create a pretty big orchestral sound, but they just recorded it in their house, like one musician at a time, you know, kind of putting it together.
It's really impressive. It's really, really gorgeous, I have to say. So you wrote it, directed it, and then you edited it as well. So how do you find wearing all of those different hats? Does it come quite naturally, or do you kind of have to switch off and focus on each individual one? Or even as you're directing, are you thinking about being in the editing room?
Yeah, I'm definitely like thinking about it all at once. And I think it's because I kind of like, I grew up making films from a young age and used to think of it. It's like one activity, it's filmmaking, and you do whatever task is needed at that stage. So it all kind of grows out of the same thing. And but I think directing is the main thing and the most important thing to me. And then I don't consider myself a natural writer. I like write so that I can direct it. And editing, I feel a bit more at home in. Like, I do really just love and enjoy that process. And I think it does help to like, I'm always thinking about how things cut together, especially when you're working fast and thinking like, okay, if we cut that shot, will this cut to this? And, you know, that kind of technical thinking. And so, yeah, I think it's all good as long as I make sure that I have other people around to bounce things off on and keep me honest and stop me getting like lost in my own either enthusiasm or like hypercritical nature.
Of course, naturally, as creatives, of course. Yeah. And I guess that brings me on to how, you know, having the people around you to, you know, keep you going, or also, you know, or to be able to bounce things off and stuff. How do you know when it's finished? So, you know, how do you know when, okay, this is the final edit? You know, how did you have many edits before? Did it change throughout the edit?
Changed so much. And there was particularly the kind of last half of the film where things start to get stranger. There was a lot of different possibilities for that. And there was I knew there was going to be these different voiceover elements, but a lot of that was written in the editing. So that felt a bit more like the way things can change with the documentary. The editing really dragged out. It took place over about 1.5 years because we shot just before the pandemic, and then I was editing on and off through the pandemic when I was able to focus on it. So it's hard to know, you know, like a lot of pandemic things, it's like how much of that was the film or just the circumstances. But yeah, it definitely took a while to figure it out. And I think with like knowing when it's finished, it's usually just like reaching a point of exhaustion where when you start making changes and it's getting worse.
Step away.
And it's like, maybe it was better yesterday. Maybe let's go back. Maybe, I don't know, you know. Yeah, you just kind of reach a point where it's like, okay, but I mean, I'm such a like obsessive perfectionist that I was, you know, throughout sound design and color, I was tweaking. I was even going back and thinking, well, maybe let's take 2 frames off here. And still, if I see it, like I'll see something that I think I should have changed.
Of course,
you know?
Of course. So what was then with COVID then, I guess, in the middle, what was the rough kind of timeline from, say, getting the Arts Council on board to the first time you saw it on the big screen?
Got the funding, was kind of researching and prepping it through 2019, and then we shot it in like September, October, and then took a break for a few months. And then January 2020, I was like, okay, let's get stuck into this. great year ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like finished towards the end of 2021. So the first screening was this year, in March. So it was like, yeah, over 3 years from when we got the funding, I guess.
Wow, that's amazing.
So yeah, I don't know. These things it all feels relative, because I know people who spend like 10 years raising money for a film and 5 years editing it and stuff.
Just becomes a bit of a blur.
I mean, it was a real blessing to just have that support from the Arts Council, because it was just film fully funded in one swoop, and they just give you a lot of freedom to make the film you want to make. And
you kind of touched earlier about how, you know, I guess this film would be categorized genre-wise as experimental, which I imagine is quite a freeing term, you know, not having to be put in a genre box like drama or thriller or comedy. And is that what you quite like in your filmmaking, and is that the feeling of the film, that like that it's more of an offering as opposed to, you know, you're telling the audience something? Or
yeah, I wouldn't actually like volunteer to call it experimental. I think it's got experimental elements to it, but it's tricky, I think, because I think like being defined as experimental can be even more of a box in a way, because people have so many like preconceptions or ideas about that, even if they're vague ones. It's like, oh, so there's no story, oh, so it'll be, or so, oh, it's just for a tiny audience or something like that. But whereas, you know, I think it does play with genre. There's like kind of genre elements in it that are sort of hinted at or established and then subverted. You know, I kind of thought of the idea of the whole film as like a film that starts off in a more linear setup, where you have this familiarity of, it's like, okay, two characters who are different but have something in common, and they're going to go on this journey together, and they're kind of getting closer to their destination, and they're meeting interesting characters. Maybe they're going to learn something from these other. So it starts off like that, and then it kind of goes off the rails, and the film sort of falls apart in a way and becomes almost another kind of film. And that's more exciting to play with, is to kind of work with familiar elements and then subvert them and turn them upside down, rather than to start in a place of like already swimming in something totally like unfamiliar and confusing or something, you know?
Definitely.
And I like playing with that tension of kind of, you know, there are characters that hopefully feel kind of real and emotional and have these pasts, who are going into this otherworldly thing. So yeah, I think a lot of those categories, it's like, you know, if I was applying to like a film festival that wanted experimental films, then it's an experimental film. Sure, show my film, please. But it all depends on the context and who you're talking to.
Exactly, definitely. Well, I think I really love that it kind of collapses the boundaries between history and mythology, and like you were saying, fact and fiction, and then documentary and classic kind of film style, all building to a really terrific scene near the end that I think actually with lesser talent attached, it could have fallen flat because of how kind of different it is. And I think Dale and Judith just do such a gorgeous job in this. And I love that the women take care of each other at different times. And it's a complex relationship. You know, you kind of never really know where either of them are standing with each other at times. Like it's not entirely defined by employee and employer, or necessarily even as a friendship either. You know, it kind of blends between a lot of different kinds of relationships. What was it that, and I know at the beginning we were kind of talking about how layered, you know, Granuaile stories can get. I particularly love the one where they're shooting with the actors, and she says, you know, well, wasn't she supposed to be bald? You know, Whale is Irish for bald, and you know, she cut her hair, and you know, it kind of just grew and grew and grew. Was it that you wanted to just offer all of these different kinds of opinions and stories about Granuaile, as opposed to actually like, this is the story I want to tell?
Yeah, because it's the multiplicity of it that was most fascinating to me, I think. And then, you know, inevitably, like I'm making a lot of choices about, you know, which stories I'm emphasizing or which interpretations. You know, so it's not like a kind of free for all of putting anything in. But I think I was especially fascinated, like that example about Whale meaning bald, but then her family name is Niamh, and thinking, well, like maybe somewhere along the line someone was like spelt it, because every English document they like spell the name, they pronounce her name different. So it literally could have just been like someone misread her name and thought she was bald, and then someone made up for it. Or there's another story we use in the film about Prince love affair with, which is I've read about before as it being like a folk tale that's been passed on. And then from doing more reading, I'm pretty sure it started in a novel, this English romance novel about Granuaile that was written in 1850, but everyone's forgotten about the novel, so they think it's a real folk tale. And that idea of things going back and forth from the kind of the like myth to the literature to the folk tale to the, you know, historical fact.
Conspiracy theory.
Yes, I've got my tinfoil hat on for my ideas on Granuaile. And yeah, I think then just thinking how that could also be connected in this strange way to a story about grief and loss, and thinking about how we relate to the people in our lives that we've lost and the stories that we tell about them and the meanings that we put on people after they're gone. So that just seemed like a rich, you know, mess of stuff to.
And it is. It's really rich throughout. And I think I would say to like people who haven't seen it, or, you know, to the audience, to not necessarily to expect any kind of clear answers or, you know, biopic facts, but what I took away from it was just a really emotionally engaging experience. And yeah, I just really loved that about the film. But another thing that I loved was a scene where the man is sitting at the bar in Clare Island, talking to Dale's character, and he says that Granuaile is in the genes in the people in Clare Island. So I know that there were obviously a lot of actors involved, like Andrew Bennett and Finn Walton and that, but were there any locals that got involved then as well? One of my favorite lines also is when the guy in the shop says, "Oh, you're making a film, if you need any actors," you know. I just thought that was, I've definitely heard that before. So yeah, did you have kind of any local thespians coming forth?
Well, actually, that old fella in the pub that you mentioned is not a local. He's old Irish filmmaker Bob Quinn, who was one of the like Irish first wave filmmakers. He made first Irish language film, Pusheen, and a lot of great stuff. And he also made the first films on Clare Island. He made a feature there with Dónal in the 80s, Budawani. So he has this connection to the island going way back, and some of his films were like a real inspiration to me. So I convinced him to come out and do that scene.
That was nice full circle, yeah.
And that was one of the few scenes that was just totally improvised. I just got him, you know, to waffle about a few things. But in terms of other locals, I mean, we had a lot of great like support and help from them. And there's the scene in the pub that's all locals. And one of the young guys who's his mother runs the bar there. He's doing the dancing. So that scene, you see a lot of locals and occasionally spotted about, but all of the actors are actors. That's Cillian Roche in the shop, and I've been surprised that some people had thought that, you know, or people who don't know Andrew Bennett is like, oh, so you got the guy, just the local fairy guy.
I know. Well, I mean, he clearly does a very good job then. So it was, if that scene with Mr. Crinn was improvised, was, I imagine then the scene with Donald Clark, the film critic at the beginning, was also improvised then as well.
That was actually fairly rehearsed, because so I got Donald Clark to come when we were a few weeks of rehearsal. I got him in and I sent him a sort of biography of Moore's, the filmmaker that Dale was playing, saying like, so she started making films here and she made a few films and then she did this and then she stopped making films, just to give him a sense of like who he was talking to. And then we did a rehearsal, like a half an hour Q&A with her, totally improvised.
Wow.
And I would just kind of give them directions and nudging, and I had to nudge him to basically be more confident, a bit less. He would have been nicer if I'd let him. And so from that, I like wrote a script that he pretty much stuck to. He kind of said it in his own words. Yeah, he did a very good job.
I thought it was a really good representation of a Q&A. I've been at a few Q&As in my time where they've just gotten a bit awkward and everyone in the cinema is like, just get me out of here, let alone with the breakup going on behind you. So there's a whole lot going on in that IFI scene, which I just think is fantastic. Nice. But I really, really loved it, I have to say. So congratulations on a wonderful film. So as always, I like to ask my guests what their favorite Irish film is, or kind of most one that they'll return back to. And if there's been a film throughout your life that has had quite a big impact in any way, shape or form.
Oh, a favorite Irish film, I think today I would say Maeve by Pat Murphy, which is another kind of first wave film from the early 80s, which I saw. It's, you know, it's about the troubles in Northern Ireland from this like very interesting feminist point of view, and I saw it while I was researching my my doc, The Image You Missed, and it was such an inspiration. I ended up quoting some parts of it in it, but it's such a unique film in its ideas and in its style that I don't think there's been anything like it since. In Irish film, or even like anywhere else that really does it with that style and that angle. So yeah, that's one that I'd encourage anyone to check out.
Amazing.
And then a film that's been just more generally important.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a positive impact. This could be one that you never want to see again. This could be one, you know, that you constantly go back to if you're, you know, having a sick day and you just always throw on. It makes you laugh. It could be, or maybe one that inspired you to start making films. Anything. Because I do hate the term favorite film. So it's kind of just like anything that's moved you in some sort of way.
I think off the top of my head, I'd say, well, John Cassavetes, the American independent filmmaker, he was like one of the most important filmmakers for me as a teenager, after I'd already been making films like with my friends for a few years, but I hadn't really thought that seriously about it. And he made a film called Faces, which is about a kind of marriage falling apart. And he just shot it on weekends in his house with like friends and family over several years. And just the way he was able to make a film that's like so emotionally intense and well acted in that way, I thought was very inspiring. That, oh, you don't need a lot to like make a film that can be moving and that can will stand the test of time.
Definitely. I'm going to add that on my list. This is why I love asking people this, because my list is just getting longer and longer. Well, thank you so much, Dónal. I really, really appreciate the time for you coming on to talk to me, and well done again. And we're looking forward to seeing Granuaile in the Irish Film London Festival. It's going to be on the 19th of November in the Riverside Studios at 5 p.m. and you can get tickets on the website for that now. So thanks so much, Dónal.
Thanks very much. It's also playing in Belfast and Derry at the Foyle Film Festival in November as well. So
amazing, brilliant, even better, because we've got people listening from everywhere. So I'm delighted it's getting to be seen more and more. So definitely check that out if you haven't already seen it. And thanks a million, Dónal. We'll talk to you very, very soon. And that's it for this week's interview. Thank you all so much for listening. We hope you really enjoyed it. Thank you to Culture Ireland and the Irish Emigrant Support Programme. Myself and Jerry will be back in a fortnight with a brand new interview. See you then.